excellent experts and panelists who bring together representatives of the climate and humanitarian donors, with representatives from countries who face diverse degrees of crisis and fragile settings. Before we start the discussion, we'll have the pleasure to hear from Carolina Fuentes, Director of the Division of Country Programming in the Green Climate Fund. Before I give Carolina the floor, I would like to introduce briefly all our speakers, our panelists. So we have Jihad Al-Sawai, Technical Advisor to the Minister of Environment from Jordan. Next to Carolina, we have Abdul Wahid Arman, Director of the Climate Change Unit at the Environment Protection Authority of Yemen. Hannah Ramalada, who is going to join us, and Abdullahi Khalif, NDC Country Facilitator of Somalia. So very, very quickly, and I'm sure that all of you are very, very aware of that climate change continues to result in frequent shocks and crises with growing damages and losses. And we are seeing significant impact and consequences for migration and displacement, damage to livelihoods, infrastructure and assets, increased and protected hunger and inequality, among other consequences. And globally, acute food insecurity is at a record high, driven by a deadly mix of conflicts, climate change-related weather extremes, and economic shocks, including those caused by COVID-19. Our speakers today will bring the climate, peace, and security nexus to the forefront of the climate discussion on action and finance in fragile and conflict-affected countries by showcasing examples. Food crisis countries are some of the most vulnerable to and hardest hit by climate change. And there are four key climate-related security risks in relation to agri-food systems that illustrate the complex relationship between climate conflict and food crisis. And this is what we will hear about in the coming minutes: competition over natural resources, deterioration of livelihood conditions and food security, climate-induced food price spikes, and mobility and displacement. FAO and its partners support the blending of disaster risk reduction and climate change adaptation. And we believe in FAO that agri-food systems provide crucial solutions to climate crisis by building resilience. However, these solutions require conflict and climate and nature-sensitive investments for upscaling and disseminating. So now I would like to give the floor to Carolina Fuentes for her to give us some opening remarks on the GCF commitment to climate finance in fragile settings. Carolina, over to you.
Thank you so much, Nadine, and many thanks also to FAO for this invitation and for organizing a panel on such an important topic. It is important that climate finance is inclusive, and that means as well that we enable climate finance going to the places that need it most. Fragile and conflict-affected countries are part of those geographies that need more support, including to address climate change, given the fact as well that addressing climate change can create the safety nets that are needed for populations in conflict affected areas to be able to cope with the impacts of climate change and also being able to thrive in a fragile environment. With this, I take the chance as well to thank FAO for inviting us to join this distinguished panel, also with other agencies and with country representatives. Let me start also by noting that GCF is a country-driven organization, and as that, we rely also on the priorities of countries when it comes to the support that we provide in terms of climate finance. But providing that support also needs to be anchored on an understanding of the country context. When it comes to conflict-affected areas and fragile environments, there is a need also to have the information and the data that can enable that understanding as the basis for us to support countries in identifying the needs that they require, both for capacity building and also for investments in terms of funding proposals. Now, when it comes to capacity building, we have a readiness program that is intended to create that capacity. Also, perhaps important to note that in the context of the GCF strategic plan for 2024 and 2027, there is also a priority of providing support to most vulnerable countries. That is one of the core operational priorities that we have at the heart of our strategy for the next programming cycle that goes from 2023 to 2027. When it comes to most vulnerable countries, we also note that that is not only with respect to specific geographies, but also to the situations and to the conditions in which different countries, communities, and populations live. When it comes to conflict affected and fragile environments, there is an acute need also to act on climate finance and also to increase the level of support that we provide to those geographies. So this is a core operational priority for GCF, and guided by that, we're also trying to identify the best way to continue and strengthen GCF support whenever we have geographies with conflicts and fragile environments. Now, in very specific terms, the support is provided for capacity building through readiness. Also, one of the announcements here to make is that the readiness strategy that was recently approved by our board can provide support for countries of up to $4 million over a 4-year period, a 4-year programming cycle, to identify their capacity needs. When it comes to food systems, of course, are an interlinked web of pathways covering the production of food, processing, distribution, and consumption, and are easily impacted by climate change. So we can provide support as well for countries to identify the actions that need to take place in the context of this value chain of food production, use consumption as well, to make sure that that capacity building is there, that the creation of those capacities. Also, we identify that food systems are very important, both in terms of reducing emissions and enhancing resilience, but also in terms of making sure that the populations are stronger. So the social aspect as well of the interventions that are supported through climate funds are important to consider when developing this type of proposals. There is a great need as well we identify to transform local food systems when it comes to conflict affected areas and fragile environments. And one of the key challenges also that GCF is very committed to support is enhancing access to finance small scale farmers and farming communities and the agri-food systems as large, so they can continue to be and can play even a greater role as safety nets for vulnerable and poor farming communities to handle conflict in a better way and also to be able to cope with a challenging environment. We stand ready to support, and that would be my concluding remark. We stand ready to support and unlock access to climate finance and create the right investments needed to secure the existence of these crucial agri-food systems and the role they play in safeguarding communities in times of conflict and hardships. We will be also available, including during COP and afterwards, to liaise with you and with country representatives and other agencies to make sure that we can structure a package of support for countries that can translate into a country program, a readiness proposal as well, and also funded investments that can be presented to the GCF, both through the network of accredited entities such as FAO, and in some cases with direct access entities as well. Many thanks for that, and thank you for this space, Nadine.
Thank you very much, Carolina. And I think it was very reassuring to hear that. So welcome, Hannah. And I, I really, you made your introduction was really very well fitted, because I think all the participants now who are going to take the floor will be sharing many of their experiences and the challenges they have to in handling, or the opportunities they see in handling climate change and insecurity, and also how climate finance can make a big difference. So without any waiting any further, I'm going to pose to each of the panelists the same question, and we really welcome to hear your feedback and your views on the topic I'm going to share with you now. So, considering the unique challenges of fragile context and food crisis situation, could you tell us, each of you, how can climate action and finance in agri-food systems contribute solutions to reduce forced displacement and climate-induced mobility, build climate resilience, and sustain peace? So, big topic, important subjects, especially in all of your countries. And I will first give the floor to Mr. Jihad Al Sawai from Jordan, who I'm sure will share some very interesting insights and a new initiative led by Jordan. Over to you.
Thank you very much. I would like first to thank the FAO for this kind invitation and for their support. And I come from a country which is affected so much by the refugees and by political situation in our region. So we have a population of around 11 million people in Jordan, third of which are actually refugees. And we have long history of hosting refugees in Jordan. And this is for a country like Jordan, which has limited resources, especially when it comes to water scarcity. The situation becomes difficult. So, last year, His Majesty King Abdullah II, the King of Jordan, he announced an initiative which actually called the Climate Refugees Nexus Initiative. And today in the morning, we had a side event which was dedicated to this initiative. And the initiative actually calls for the international community to to have more support to countries that are affected by a high percentage of refugees like Jordan, and there are many other countries like, for example, Turkey, Lebanon, and Lebanon. Yeah, I'm mentioning Lebanon. So, and at the same time, we also suffer from the negative consequences of climate change. Jordan, for example, is ranked among the top countries when it comes to water scarcity. Our water resources are limited, and this, of course, affects our agriculture and food security in Jordan, and that's where we need the support. What I want to say that the climate action and the financial systems dealing with climate action, they should take into account these countries, that they should give them priorities for funding and for technical support. For the initiative, we had the support of about 58 countries so far, and we actually proposed it as one of the solutions for the relief, recovery, and peace declaration, which was announced by the United Arab Emirates yesterday. And we are doing our job in Jordan to increase our resilience. We will not be waiting for the international community to come and solve our problems. We are doing our share, and we are taking our responsibility, even that it's not our responsibility to have refugees and to actually be left alone to deal with this problem. This problem is an international problem, and there should be an international solution, and there should be an international support. But for us in Jordan, we are doing many things when it comes to climate action. For example, 27% of our electricity is being generated from renewables, which is a big number. And our target for 2030 is 31%, but I am sure that we will go beyond this. Our ambition is to go to 50% by 2030. And for example, in e-mobility, 18.5% of the passenger cars among all cars in Jordan are electric or hybrid, and 25% from the passenger cars when it's compared to, I mean, they are 24.5% of the cars in Jordan are electric or hybrid when we take into account the passenger cars. We have solutions when it comes to harvesting to be able to give solutions for the fragile communities and for agriculture. We come up with many solutions. For example, the water harvesting, rainwater harvesting, the water reuse. For example, Jordan also 90% of the wastewater in Jordan is actually retreated and used for restricted agriculture in Jordan. So this increases our resilience to shocks, as was mentioned at the beginning. Now we are having a big project about it's called the National Water Conveyor, and we will be desalinating water from the Gulf of Aqaba in the south and pumping it to the central and north regions of Jordan. We are working with the climate smart agriculture to increase our resilience with hydroponic, aquaponic, and with agriculture that could save water because we don't have much water. And we also work on circular economy, ecotourism. We actually developed a green growth national action plan, which focuses on 6 sectors. And agriculture is one of those sectors where we have clear actions and projects that should be achieved and implemented to help us in the agriculture sector. We know that the situation is not easy, but we are facing up to our challenges. We actually developed green finance strategy in Jordan, and this is one of the strategies. Maybe Jordan is the first country in the region to come up with a green finance strategy. It was done by the central bank and in cooperation with the World Bank. And we developed also green bonds. One of the main banks in Jordan actually developed the green bonds. I would like lastly to thank the FAO again and thank GCF for supporting our projects and for all the donors that cooperate and support us in Jordan. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And sorry that I had to make a sign, but we have many panelists. And although your intervention was extremely interesting and really appreciated the efforts made by Jordan to address climate change. But as you said, clearly there is also, Jordan has also to face a challenge of part of the population being refugees and water scarcity. And there is no way that there will be climate change can be the impact of climate change on Jordan can be fully addressed with the current type of actions. There needs to be a scale up. So thank you very much. I will now ask Abdul Wahid, sorry for mispronouncing your name, Arman from Yemen to join me here. And again, if need be, I would like to repeat it. Can you tell us, considering the unique challenges of fragile context and food crisis situations, how can climate action and finance in agri-food systems contribute solution to reduce forced displacement and climate-induced mobility, build climate resilience, and sustain peace? Thank you.
Um, Hello, everyone. It's a pleasure to be with you today, and I would like to thank our colleagues in FEO for giving us this opportunity to present our experiences and challenges that we are facing in Yemen to address the climate change impacts on food security. Yemen is a fragile country and experienced conflict for more than 8 years from 2015. And I will try to focus on the challenges that fragile countries are facing to access climate finance, because climate finance is the heart of climate action. We cannot implement our strategies, our priorities, and reflect them to implementation on the ground without a finance. I will not go to the details of the impact of climate change on food security because I think it's almost known by everyone. But you should know that the climate change impacts on the fragile countries are double and continue increasing, and it needs prompt actions to address these challenges. This is because in fragile countries, climate change is not among the most pressing issues like education, health, and humanitarian crisis. The priority is to address these humanitarian issues, not to address climate change impacts, because everyone sees the health conditions, but no one can see the climate change impacts. But with the time, climate change is impacting food security, is increasing the water scarcity, and impacting all the aspects of life. At this point, these countries, fragile countries, urgently needs to effectively utilize the climate finance channels in order to combat the climate change and address its implications on the food security and water scarcity, because at the end, water scarcity and food security as are interlinked. Um, as I said in the beginning, I will try to focus on the challenges. So the challenges can be categorized into national, which is local challenges that we are facing in our countries among the government, among the stakeholders, and then I will speak about the climate finance policies. Regarding the national challenges, as I said in the beginning, fragile countries has its own priorities, and also they have weak institutions because climate one entity cannot lead the climate action. It must be done by all the stakeholders, including public and private sectors. So the weak coordination among the public and private sectors is one of the key issues that hindering our countries from accessing climate finance. And also there is a technical capacity challenges in order to access climate finance to respond to the climate change impacts. I will go now for the technical capacities. Also, I forgot to mention it. Technical capacities, we have like lack of data and information. Sometimes writing high quality proposals require a lot of data and information which cannot be provided in countries that are fragile. For climate finance procedures and policies, I think this issue is common for most of LDC's countries. Firstly, the difficulties of fulfilling the requirement of the climate finance sometimes is very difficult for our countries. As I said, it needs data and information which is not easily to be available in our countries. Also, there is a long process to approve this proposal. Sometimes it takes up to 3 months. I know it depends on the quality of writing or something like that, but at the end, the fragile countries must be considered in providing the requirements for funding proposals. Also, the accreditation. Uh, I mean, direct access entities in each country, it is a very big issue because, with all the respect to our colleagues from UN organization, but I think direct access entities or national accredited entities, they know our circumstances, they know well our priorities, so they know our circumstances, they know well our priorities. So I think this kind of accreditation or the process of accreditation needs to be faster, and also the fragile countries must have like some uh, they must have support to establish their own direct access entities, and we seek our colleagues in GCF and other climate finance entities to support us in this point and to have more accredited entities, because without accreditation and without national accredited entities we cannot move forward, because uh, this I mean, as I said in the beginning, fragile countries now depends on only in climate finance to address the climate change impacts, and they don't have any additional resources. So I guess as a suggestion from my side that can ease the process to access climate finance, I was saying that firstly we need to build our capacities. in terms of technical and institutional capacity to be able to work on all the issues, including food security. Secondly, we need to find innovative and simplified process to mobilize climate finance from all the resources. And just an example, we have under the GEF LDC fund, which is only for LDC. And I'm asking here why we GCF cannot have this kind of a channels also, which is can ease our fragile countries and LDC countries to access more finance and mobilize and implement their priorities. And lastly, uh, which I say the accreditation, we need more support to have our direct access entities, and that will ease our way to access more climate finance and reflect it on the ground to address our food security. And I think that's all from my side. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. And I'm sure Carolina will, if you can stay, we'll have some time to answer at the end during the question and answers. Very interesting points you raised, both in terms of national constraints and how GCF can help address those, and the other barriers that were mentioned. So thank you very much. So now it's my pleasure to. That's your phone, right? So now it's my pleasure to invite Mrs. Hannah Hamadallah from Sudan to come here. And I will ask you again some question. How can climate action and finance in agri-food systems contribute solutions to reduce forced displacement, build climate resilience, and sustain peace based on your own experience in Sudan? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you and good afternoon. Thank you and good afternoon, colleague. Let me start by thanking the FAO, Food Agriculture Organization, for organizing this event and for inviting Sudan to be part of this panel. I try to be very quick because we have a very long journey since 1997. Since we start our national communication, and after that NABA and NAB and now NDCs, and for all those journeys, the finance access remain as a challenges for us. In spite, we have a good some projects that funded from GEF and recently from GCF. But still, we believe that we are lagging behind when we look for the impacts of the countries and the country's phase and the situation in the general, in terms of technology transfer, in terms of capacity building. Sudan ecological zone have has an examination indicates that the majority of its land is quite vulnerable to change in temperature and precipitation. Change in temperature and rainfall also represent a high risk to food security in Sudan, agropastoral based economy. Actually, our economy is heavily dependent on agriculture in terms of crop and livelihood and livestock and forestry sector. Agriculture provide 90% of raw material for local industry, employment, and income for more than 80% of the population. We believe that our country, as like other country in the region, the climate change, environmental degradation, and growing population are shrinking the natural resource base, leading to growing pressure on land and water resources and increasing competition resources. At this situation, farmers are pushed to expand the land under cultivation with the risk of damaging fragile ecosystem and enroaching on land traditionally used for pasture. At the same time, seasonal lack of water or suitable grazing drive pastoralists into farmland. The resulting tension often lead to conflict between communities or result in displacement and loss of livelihood, which then fuel social, economic, and political tension, which you see this accumulated of all these reasons uh, led us to the situation that Sudan recently have. Uh, so we believe that all this situation uh, need to be in the consideration because it is interlinkages with the diverse challenges, impacts that country face. Uh, Definitely, the close coordination between different actors at the national level and as well as the regional level is very important. But the most important see, we believe the increasing of finance, and still we are far from this, as we said, with these challenges that we face. So as we said, we have experience in 1997 when we did our national communication in the chapter of the impacts, vulnerability, and adaptation. So we identified that the agriculture sectors and water sector are the most vulnerable sectors for Sudan. And from that time, we thinking how access to the fund. Uh, Unfortunately, at that time, the only window for Sudan is a gift, and it is a very limited fund. It is allocated fund, allocated for the countries with the specific criteria. So we have a few of it for Sudan to implement like a pilot project. The pilot project definitely assists us to upscaling to some extent uh, the finance for other some project even through the GIF or through the GCF recently. So Sudan is the first country that submitted. It is now in 2016, and since that time, project for implementation of some of the priorities that identified in the NAP. And fortunately, we success to have a fund through UNDP with the GCF, but also we believe that this fund is very limited. It is 25,000, but it is for 9 countries. When you divide it, it is like the GIF fund. It is also like a pilot project. It is not a substantive. Uh, yeah, even if we implement we implemented it in the two agriculture and water sector, but also like other pilot projects. For climate change adaptation was linked uh, to to including GCF because the adaptation fund from GCF is not enough, and even the country face difficulties to access to the fund. And if we look for the report from the lake 40 have challenges as well as the developing countries have challenges to reach this fund. So, but at least we were success as Sudan with the FAO currently implementing 3G activities, two readiness proposal and one fund proposal in water and in agriculture as well as in the forestry. So we hope these rules, we can also go and advantages of those projects scaling for another project proposal. Last things, so we believe that adaptation to current and future climate has long received less attention and less finance. We need to stress on this because IPCC has made it clear that we are now in extraordinary territory with every small delay to advance. So we move to closer to the climate, and also we need to sustain sustainability or human population to be uh, consistent with what happened in the world. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And it's always a challenge to be a moderator because that means also doing some time police. So sorry, I have to ask everyone to be a bit shorter. Thank you very much for your last call for more funding for adaptation. And thank you also for recalling how climate finance can be really an accelerator and can be proactive in promoting in supporting restoration of some of the key resources, land and water, and thus contributing to preventing conflict. So I think that was a very important message. So our last panelist now, last but not least, of course, Abdullahi Khalif from Somalia. I would like you to come here and give us your insight on how climate finance can contribute to climate resilience and sustain peace. Thank you.
Um, I will start before I answer that question. I think I can answer that question in one proverb, which says, "You must crack the nuts before you can eat the kernel." So, first of all, I remember in some 12 years ago when the devastating famine occurred in the Horn of Africa, particularly in Somalia in 2011, we gathered and then we said never again. I remember, as 12 years younger than I am today, we used that word. And a very good colleague of mine who just walked in, whom we were sitting together, saying Dane can be my witness. So, build the resilience. I think there should be three things to consider. One, for the countries affected by climate change or the fragile countries. So the fragile countries must not only look at the donors, they must have their own plan and their domestic funding, no matter how much it is, whether it is 10%, 20%, or 5%, so that والله في عون العبد ما كان العبد في عون أخيه. Or God helps who helps himself first. So I think that notion of just waiting finance from the donors must now get a new approach from the fragile countries. The fragile countries can have a very good, sophisticated strategies, but those strategies usually end up in the shelves. For example, in Somalia, the day before yesterday, we have launched the country's national NDC implementation plan until 2030, which posted 6.16 billion US dollar. I don't want it to see, and I'm not hoping to see that this 16.9 billion just ended up as a word and the end is there. So what would the country will do, what the donors will do, what the GCF will do, and how? That should be. So the strategies must be realized. For the vertical fund is the climate financing should actually also be realistic and the work on the context of specific countries. So the specific, every country has its own specificity. And it cannot be like an envelope of a climate finance goes to the fragile countries. Localization is very big issue, should be embraced. Because those who know local contexts should be supported by climate. Some 10 years, 15 years ago, but it was not successful. It must be successful. After the localization, what is the use of the localization? Localization or local institutions equal partnership can actually reach the hard to reach areas. So in that case, climate finance, it should actually be a context specific. And the context specificity should actually be embraced. I think with those few words, if my time is not yet up, I can add one more sentence. But if it is, I can just stop there. Yeah. So when you look at the climate change impact on security, insecurity, and peace, the mobility of the people caused by climate change is back to climate. 10% of Africa's population will be moving, and they will be moving to the urban centers, whether it is within the country or the neighboring countries. So enabling programming system for that climate mobility, climate change cost mobility should be there. So enabling environment in urban centers must be created. And country is a big thing, but it is under threat. So alternative livelihood must be created. For example, a country like Somalia, this word of blue economy, we can create love between the communities and the seas or oceans, which can be a big livelihood change, rather than relying on livestock, on pastoralism, which is always affected by drought and the floods. Then we can create an alternative livelihood system. So that is my concluding remarks. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Really very, very interesting insight from you, Mr. Abdullahi Khalif. So I think that now we'll ask Andrea Alfieri, Deputy Head of Unit for the European Commission Directorate General for International Partnerships, come and share with us the European Commission vision on this very important topic, and hopefully having been inspired by our previous speakers.
Thank you. Thank you to the organizer. Thank you to the other panelists. Absolutely, I absorb a lot of information and a lot of interesting. I learn a lot of interesting things every time I'm on a panel on the various countries that are represented. So I can see that you're very vocal in your request to receive more and better climate finance in your own countries, and you highlighted also some possible solutions and ideas. I also thank the audience that they are always patient and stay until the end, of course. So no, from the European Commission or let's say European Union point of view, we've been engaged both on climate, climate finance, and humanitarian assistance and development assistance for a number of years, as you know. Say from our side, we are quite happy every time we have to speak in this type of event to mention that according to the numbers, we remain the largest public climate finance donor with together with the, which is quite sizable, and it's been increasing over the years. And we are still around 30% of global humanitarian assistance, and together again, EU and EU member states. So I can say that definitely you can count on us as a partner in this challenge. And we are well aware that the challenge is getting more complicated. We know that food security and food prices are being exacerbated by climate change, being access, being availability, utilization, stability. There are plenty of studies that they've been presented already over these days, looking at these dimensions, and it's quite regularly if we overshoot the 1.5 target that we set ourselves with the Paris Agreement. There are two issues that I noted down also from the previous interventions that it seems to me that can be added or complemented. One, I think, in the action in the task that we give ourselves to increase this type of finance related to climate and food prices. One issue I think is the issue of urgency. And the fact that we are always under pressure to respond to this type of crisis. And this is not, let's say, conducive of a long-term perspective in terms of sustainability that we must ensure. Otherwise, we will, let's say, trigger a sort of a vicious circle. So the issue of overexploitation of natural resources is something that has to be fixed, and is something that has to be also taken into account when we deal with a sort of transformation which looks at the long term, looks at the core of the climate issue. So, for instance, in our case, we're quite let's say vocal in promoting approaches like agroecology, which, as you know, is something that looks at sustainability and reduction of use of relevant for drylands or areas where pastoralism is an important source of revenue. The second dimension, I think, is the complexity of this problem that we all know. It's not a surprise. But then again, as the colleague from Somalia was saying, this complexity means also that the response has to be tailored at local level, also access to information, analysis, solid analysis that can be made available, I would say, at different levels. Because one thing is organizations that can allow us to cover this last mile. Again, I refer to the colleagues from Somalia, where actually things have to take place. And I'm thinking about a lot of tools and applications that these days they've been presented on telephones, cell phones, or even internet were available, but that can really reach the individual. So being at an event organized by FAO, I wanted to mention as an example of this approach, the Global Network Against Food Crisis that we are supporting together with that basically is, for us, it's an investment in a global public good that produces a lot of information on food security, food crisis, which is standardized and ready to use across the world. And that we believe it's a tool that should be used more and more in terms of analysis across countries to make this type of informed decision. I just mentioned briefly, just for I think there are areas when we deal with humanitarian and long-term development response in the agri-food sector that everybody is mentioning over these days. One is early warning systems to reduce the impact of natural disasters. One is water. I think it's a second area that everybody is mentioning, particularly because we know smallholders depend on rain-fed agriculture. One is post-harvest losses. Again, I keep hearing it over these days. And the last one is, of course, soil degradation, particularly in drylands and particularly in Africa. So I think these four dimensions are very important, being humanitarian, being development. That is something that we need to keep in mind when we design our actions in the future. I stop here. I think I'm very glad that with this COP, of our agricultural production have taken the center of the agenda to be before, which means I hope that more resources will come. But at the same time, I have to say we have a challenge as a community of interested parties, donors, countries, international organizations. The landscape of our action is very fragmented. And I think, people, communities, governments at any possible level need simpler rules, better access, more coordination. I think this is a challenge that we have to take. And well, I would like to conclude with this. Thanks.
Thank you very much. So we have run past the time. So I'm not sure I can take, although I would love it. I'm not sure I can take, although I would love it. I'm not sure I can take any question from the floor. Sylvie, probably not, right? So maybe before we conclude, I was Mrs. Fuentes. I have to leave the director of GCF, so she asked me to pass on messages. So these are not FAO. This is on behalf of Carolina. I share them from GCF, and she wanted to reconfirm that GCF has, with a new readiness strategy, made available a special window for LDCs starting 2024, so over the next 4 years, that there is certainly with a new policy on reaccreditation much more capacity, increased capacities from the GCF to consider new application. So again, to reconfirm the wish from GCF to further support direct national entities' access to the GCF. And finally, full support of GCF through readiness to support national coordination mechanism. And her last words were, GCF has a responsibility to enhance access to climate investment and climate finance. So she wanted me to share this with the panelists. So now I take back my FAO hat to conclude and to thank, first of all, the panelists for your very insightful comments and sharing of experience. I think that we are all agreeing that this is complex, this is urgent, that it requires very targeted actions. But I take it also that everyone is very committed from the countryside through your intervention and your action and willingness to access more finance to the partners, the EU, the GCF, and from FAO to really tackle this problem together and these challenges together because we know the solutions are there. So by putting our efforts together, I'm sure that we can make it push ahead this agenda and find very good solutions for the countries and the communities. Thank you.